Why are Black Hills Energy's electric rates in Pueblo so high?
You have to go back to the history in 2007 when they first acquired Aquila. That was a bad deal from day one. And it's continued to be a bad deal. In fact, Pueblo opposed the transaction. The Office of Consumer Counsel opposed it, and trial staff opposed it. And they told the commissioners to deny the application. And they said, in the alternative, if you're going to grant it, put these guardrails on. And unfortunately, that commission, I was not on it at the time, granted the application, put a few of the guardrails on, but not as many as they should have. And so what happened is we all knew, or everyone knew at the time, that the power purchase agreement was going to expire. And the commission did tell them to come up with a plan to replace it. They did what they have always done, is they gamed the system. They delayed, because they didn't want another power purchase agreement. They wanted to own generation. Because the way you make money and profit for your shareholders is if you own the generation. And so finally, the commission let them build a new plant. And then Clean Air, Clean Jobs came in. And my God, they used that with a vengeance if you go back and look at the history. And they replaced the coal plants with new gas plants. And unfortunately, that statute let them do it without competitive bidding. So once again, they owned it. Now, where I do fault the commission is at some point they should have figured out what was going on. And it's not much more complicated, Dave, than the numerator and the denominator. As long as you keep letting them build more stuff that they're earning a rate of return on, which is the numerator, and the denominator stays the same, which is the usage and the number of customers, the per unit cost goes up. And that's why it has gone up. And then it becomes a vicious cycle that you can't get economic development because people would rather move to Colorado Springs, not to Pueblo.
But earlier on, between 2008 and 2012, it felt like the PUC was not protecting the public interest. It felt like there was capitulation to the company's requests. Can you explain a little bit about that balancing act that the commission has to undertake, and how you feel like it has played out in the case of Black Hills?
Well, you know, regulation of utilities is very complicated and it is very challenging. And I think 10 years ago, there was the attitude that you leave the utilities on their own to run things and you don't get too involved and you trust them. Unfortunately, that didn't work with Black Hills. I mean, Black Hills is the only utility, I think, that the Public Utilities Commission has admonished their chief regulatory officer twice in the last 4 years for lying to us. And so when you have a rogue utility that's willing to lie to the commission, you get bad results. And I think it took the commission a while to understand that you just couldn't trust them. Because in my opinion, they're the energizer vampire. You can't beat them down. They're always out there moving around. During the day, they look sweet and cuddly. Something happens at night when they go back to their office and they figure out every blood-sucking way they can take a dime out of the community. And what is offensive to me is that they do it to small communities, rural communities that don't have as much money. And the other thing that goes on at the commission is they have limited staff. You know, there's 3 commissioners, there's a huge amount of work. Not all commissioners in the past, quite frankly, have been diligent and or knowledgeable. It's challenging if you want to do it right. You have to work hard and you have to read a lot. And I think in the past, not all commissioners were like that. Some commissioners have political agendas, others work hard. And the commission has a small staff, 98 people, to help the commission make decisions in the area of transportation, telecom, railroad, electric and gas utilities. And so if you have a rogue utility, it is very hard to keep track of them. And quite frankly, the attention is always going to go to public service because they've got 1.5 million ratepayers.
Mm-hmm. So Black Hills is not just behaving the same way that all investor-owned utilities behave. Is that what you're saying?
Sweet Jesus, no. Sweet Jesus, no. I have been stunned at the shenanigans they have pulled just in the 4 years I was on the commission. You know, I wrote in the Chieftain about the cost of debt. Everyone knows interest rates have been low. Colorado ratepayers, especially Pueblo ratepayers in the Black Hills Service Territory, have not benefited from those low rates. Cost of gas has been next to nothing. Pueblo's not benefited from that. And the way they calculate allocate the cost of debt is they get it at the corporate level, and then they decide who's going to bear the cost. Fascinating, and I can't tell you what the numbers are because they're confidential. Fascinating. The lowest cost debt goes to their unregulated entities, which is ridiculous because unregulated entities are riskier than utilities, but that's what they do. Atmos does not issue debt for each individual affiliate entity under them, but they average the cost of debt. So Black Hills does stuff that no other utility's done. I will also say in the 4 years I was on the commission, I saw public service pull back on taking every dollar for themselves. For example, on the Colorado Energy Plan, which is what was used by public service to close Comanche 1 and 2, the coal plants. When the commission said to them, you have to go out to competitive bid to see the replacement generation, the competitive bids came in and third parties bid much lower than public service on a lot of things. Public service did not fight the commission. They awarded the bids to the lowest cost. Black Hills would never have done that. We've been litigating with them for years.